Brodeur, online producer at the Hartford Courant. You are listening to another episode of the UConn Insider Podcast. This is a football episode, so I'm joined today in our studio by beat reporter Mike Anthony. Mike, welcome.
Hey, buddy. We're missing one, huh?
We're down a man.
We're down a columnist.
We're down a columnist. We'll try to, well, I don't know. We can't replace him.
I don't know that he's replaceable, yeah.
Yeah, I think we got to do our own thing. I mean, Jake brings a certain amount of passion and
he does, and intelligence and humor, and he's a hell of a good-looking guy. So
all of the above.
I don't know how we're going to fill the gap here, but we'll do our best, and we'll have a good time.
Yeah, we'll plug along. The entertainment factor might not be totally there, but we'll try our best.
I think it's going to be a wild ride, so buckle up. Let's rock and roll.
All right, let's do it. So, obviously, the Central Florida game, kind of goes as expected. I mean, they were 40-point favorites. So in that sense, UConn probably did a little better than people.
They covered.
They covered the spread at least.
And they were right on the brink of. Look, I don't think they were ever in any realistic position of saying we should win this game, but they played pretty well. They killed themselves early, Chris. Like they just destroyed themselves in falling down 21-3,
mm-hmm.
and so overall they functioned really well. And it didn't have the look of a butt whipping.
No.
It didn't. Like in the way the game played out. Central Florida is a much better team, and they're going to win that game 10 times out of 10. But
third quarter, weren't they blanked?
The second and third quarters, UConn was really competent. Yes, and they won the third quarter 7-0. It was only the second quarter of the entire season that Central Florida had not scored a point in. Look, UConn looked all right. Edsall afterwards was just so frustrated, though, because of the self-inflicted wounds that because his thought is, my thought looking in from the outside is like, hey, you know what? The product is looking a little bit better. They represented themselves well. I'm not coaching that team, though. He looks at it like, you know what? We were down 28-17, forced a turnover, and had a chance to march down the field and score a touchdown that would have totally changed the complexion of the game if it got to 28-24.
Yep.
But they went 3-and-out. It was a lost opportunity. And early, like I said, there were just so many self-inflicted wounds, just brutal penalties,
mm-hmm.
And then an inability to convert on a 3rd and 2 and a 4th and 1 at a pivotal point in the game. So that's how he was looking at it afterwards. Like he was so consumed with frustration, you could see it in him, you could feel it, you could see his body language, and he was fine in the post game, but clearly frustrated. And I chatted with him off on the side
mm-hmm.
afterward, and I can't share exactly what we talked about, but but a little chat with him just to gain some clarity on why he felt certain ways was helpful, and
sure.
Certainly he was. I don't want to go overboard and say he was beside himself, but he was really frustrated with how some things went and how some things could have gone.
Sure, and one of the the noticeable things that in the sense that they looked different was obviously David Pindell under center starting the game. That goes back to midway through the South Florida game, he took over for the injured Bryant Shirreffs.
Yeah, I think it was early fourth quarter.
Fourth quarter. So now, it's a small sample size with him, but I think we've seen some flashes of where you go, okay, this is why this guy won this job in the preseason.
He's interesting.
Right?
Yeah. First of all, he's a lot faster than I remember him showing in the opener, and
mm-hmm.
I just don't think he was ready to do much to really show what he was all about in that.
Maybe some first night jitters.
I think he was nervous. I also think the fact that he was new to the university as the program and had only 4 weeks. Like, he didn't have spring ball coming in as a newcomer, so he had 4 weeks to prepare for that game, and that's learning teammates, coaches, and a system. And mm-hmm. so in the 10 to 11 weeks after that, he got to know all of those things, and it was clear early on that he had a much better understanding of where to go in his mind, where to go with his legs, what to do on the field, a better understanding of what his teammates were doing. And the kid can move. He can just flat out move. Now, he has some trouble throwing the ball beyond the short routes where he's fine, as he should be fine. He's a little off balance and a little inaccurate mm-hmm. downfield is something, UConn will have to hope that he improves. But what's fascinating to me, he doesn't, And I don't remember who it was, but a fan on Twitter noticed some close-up pictures of Pindell throwing the ball and how he doesn't grip the laces.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you had this in your story, right?
And the guy on Twitter asked if that was just kind of a function of him, a function of a quick release, or does he do that on purpose? And then I looked at a few pictures, and I didn't know if it was just kind of catching him as he was moving the ball around in his hand. But I asked him about it yesterday, and he said, "Yeah, as long as I've been throwing a football, I just always felt more comfortable grabbing the flats at the backside of the ball, no laces." And he said he could just always throw a better spiral that way and throw a better ball that way. To me, I don't know. I'd feel more comfortable with it if he was, throwing with pinpoint accuracy down the field.
Yeah.
But to be fair to him, we haven't seen a huge sample size, so let's see how he does this coming week, trying to hit some guys downfield.
Yeah, I think that stuff's kind of interesting. I mean, you look at a guy in the NFL like a Phillip Rivers who basically kind of shot puts the ball, right? I mean, his palm is on the back end of the football, and he kind of pushes it forward. And I think the explanation there was when he was a kid, the football was obviously huge for his hand, and that was the only way to sort of, have enough, control to move it forward. And then as he got older, it was just that's what he gets comfortable with. And I think it speaks to the fact that these guys it's like a pitcher in baseball. It's about feel. It's about what works for you. That's how you end up with some guys have weirder throwing motions and mechanics and stuff, and everybody's different.
People pick up quirky habits at different points in their lives, and if they're good and they succeed, they stick with them. Look at going back to my early days covering the UConn men's basketball team. Look at the way Rashad Anderson
that's exactly
shot
where I was going.
A three-pointer. He shot a knuckleball.
It was the ball would go over his head before he let it go.
No rotation. It was he looked like a soccer player throwing an inbound pass, and the ball would not rotate it. But
he was dead-eye.
But man, what did he shoot? 47% on three-pointers as a senior or junior? I don't know, but the kid could shoot. That's for sure. The dude could shoot. Being down in Central Florida reminded me of a basketball story too. And I hadn't been to the campus since 2008 when I was there for a UConn basketball game against Central Florida.
Yeah.
And UConn won the game by 3 or 4, but I believe it was Jermaine Taylor of Central Florida scored 30 points on UConn, and Stanley Robinson was just absolutely helpless trying to guard the kid.
Sticks.
And Calhoun was just all over Stanley, who's like the biggest sweetheart of a kid. All over him. And Stanley finally turned to Calhoun in a "what do you want me to do" manner and said, "Coach, the dude can shoot." And Calhoun went berserk. "The dude can shoot. The dude can shoot. Can you hear that?" It was quite a comical moment. I mean, not exactly what Calhoun wanted to hear.
No, he doesn't. Not a guy who likes excuses.
No, but it was a riot.
You told that story on Twitter too, right?
Yeah.
That's right. So from Pindell, we can kind of switch gears here and talk about Bryant a little bit.
Yeah.
Officially unavailable for the remainder of the season. That's
correct.
A decision that it sounds like the coaches got together, and then that's up to Bryant and his family too. Jake had the column today.
Yeah.
He talked to his father. What do you sort of make of this whole situation? Obviously, we know more now about sort of the cumulative effects of concussions and head trauma, and it just kind of feels like, what was the point of him going in there for the end of this season and potentially doing more harm to himself, right?
Yeah, let's just get the nuts and bolts out of the way with him. So he's still in concussion protocol, and as of yesterday afternoon was unavailable, and he's not on the depth chart. But Bryant went to Edsall and said, basically, look, even if I'm cleared to play or asked to play, after I'm cleared to play, I'm done. And now, look, he probably wouldn't have been getting in a game anyway, because unless he was cleared today or tomorrow, he would have continued to be unavailable for the game at Fenway. And then there's only one game left at Cincinnati a week from Saturday. And so if he got cleared in the meantime, now he goes into Cincinnati, his last game ever as a backup, and barring an injury to Pindell, he wouldn't have been needed. And I'm sure part of Bryant was sick of getting beat up and scared about the after effects of getting beat up, and also probably thinking, why run around like crazy in practice and do all this when I know I probably won't play and don't want to play anymore either.
Yeah.
So it's too bad. The last time he will have been on the field as a UConn player was when he took a targeting hit from Vincent Jackson of USF and just sustained another concussion.
Yeah.
And who knows how many he's had. John Shirreffs, Bryant's dad, told Jacobs it's not quantifiable, really.
Yeah.
But he's been dinged up pretty good in his career, and he's married or about to be married and has a young son, and
probably isn't looking at a professional football career.
No,
no,
and looking at a bright future away from football.
Sure.
Really sharp kid, and really a good guy. It's really, I gotta say, it's been a pleasure to deal with that guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's been fun to watch. He's been easy to talk to. He's just, I think he really represented that program well in 3 years on the field. Yeah, through a tough time, and through a really complicated time for him and his position. And every season ended with some wacky drama with him. I mean, he transferred and sat out a year, played in 2015, did a nice job, led him to a bowl game, but got clobbered on a dirty hit in the bowl-clinching victory over Houston, which led to a concussion. And boy, that's the scary part, listening to him tell stories reflecting on that week where he couldn't remember anything for 3 or 4 days, something like that. He sat out the Temple game, the regular season finale, comes back for the St. Petersburg Bowl in 2015 and plays part of that with a broken wrist. Just falling apart, really, through 1 year in this program. 2016 was just a disaster on many fronts for the team and the program, but Bryant started those first 9 games and played through like a dislocated, displaced, or broken rib, something super painful, whatever, however you want to term it. But he was really hurting, and finally was pulled for Donovan Williams. Thought about leaving the university. Diaco gets canned. Decides to come back. Edsall doesn't know what to think of him at first. So much was going on in Bryant's life, about to become a father and everything, and I think Edsall wondered about the buy-in and the commitment on Bryant's part. And so Bryant had to prove himself all over again and sort of win over Edsall, which he did late in the preseason when he sat down with him and said, "Look, I'm all in. No matter, I think Pindell had already been named the starter. Whatever you need me to do, Coach, I'm all in to help this team any way I can." And as it turned out, the way he could help the team was take over for a struggling newcomer, late in that opening game and lead them to a comeback victory, and then start 9 games and play really well. The kid put up good numbers. The team's not great this year, but he was kind of the adult that offense needed at times, and he played well. He should really be proud. The kid, look, he played 30 games at UConn. It's a long career. He's 4th all time in passing yards. I think he really should be remembered well by the fan base who fully understands how tough it is to find a quarterback. I mean, the whole thing about it, we haven't had a quarterback since Orlovsky.
Right.
We've had a couple decent ones in there. Certainly Shirreffs was a good one.
Sure. And, you saw the comments from some of his teammates after the UCF game, or maybe it was whenever you guys had availability, when it was known that he was going to be done. I think Junior Joseph was talking about him and stuff. It seems like he really kind of commanded the room, and these guys had the respect of all of his teammates. And again,
they love him.
Through some tough years, for a guy to stand out in that way, it's a pretty cool legacy for him. As unfortunate as it is that he's not going to be able to go out on his own terms.
He's just a likable guy because he's a tough, smart football player, but just as a human being, and I can't pretend to know him that well, but because I've only really chatted with him away from like formal interview sessions a few times, so you don't really fully know these guys, but he certainly comes across as just a likable kid, a likable guy. And it was interesting, yesterday, a senior like Junior Joseph talking about how much respect he has for him and how much he admires his toughness and how much he understands Bryant's decision to step away now. And then Pindell, who's the younger guy and trying to find his footing in college football, talking about Bryant as the big brother to him ever since he stepped on campus. And Pindell's handled himself very well, but had to be very disappointed to lose the starting spot. But then embraced Bryant's leadership and friendship, and Bryant worked towards helping Pindell mature. So I think a part of any success Pindell has moving forward, I'm sure he'd be thankful to Bryant for helping him get there.
Sure, and that stuff's always cool to see because
it is.
Quarterback controversy. This was never that, but like that stuff is always portrayed as like these guys must be at each other's throats when that stuff's going on. It's cool to hear that, like, one guy loses out on the job, steps aside, does what he needs to do to help the other guy get prepared, and vice versa, because now Pindell is back.
So you're right. It's easy to lose sight of that.
Yeah.
It's easy to lose sight of the fact that they're guys who spend weeks and months together in the off season, in the lead up to us analyzing who looked good in practice, who's going to be the starter. They've spent hours and hours and hours together in film rooms and walking across campus and hanging out on weekends, probably going to parties together. And in the Pindell Shirreffs case, Pindell talked about how he had been over Shirreffs' home and met his son and played with his son.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's a very rare circumstance where you find two guys competing for playing time who truly root against one another. Everyone wants to play, but
there's only one job.
These guys are only on public display for 3 hours once a week, really. During that game. I mean, what goes into being a college football player and a student athlete and a student, it's just their lives are pretty jam-packed full of different things that we don't see. We just see what goes on the field and hear a few times a week from their coaches and little window into that world, but they're in a huge world doing a lot of different things together. So yeah, but it had a pretty good feel yesterday to hear, and how it's come all full circle. I mean, Bryant came in and did his job, and Pindell's better for it, and you would think UConn is too.
And yeah, exactly. I was going to ask, like, do you think, we don't know what the future holds in terms of guys Randy's going to recruit for that position, but you would think that David Pindell will probably go into next year, with it's his job.
Yeah, I think it'll be open. I mean, I think they're pretty high on like a Marvin Washington who's redshirting.
Okay.
So I mean, I don't know.
All right, so maybe it's premature to.
No, but your point's well taken. That like he's going into next year.
He's a known commodity, you could say.
Exactly, and he'll have gained some valuable experience, not just in the 3 or 4 games he'll have played, but in those 40, 60 practices, whatever. And, and that game experience is certainly valuable. So you're right, absolutely. You go into next season kind of knowing where you're at. And just like we came into this season, that's the way I viewed it anyway. You know what Bryant Shirreffs is. Yeah. So I remember thinking, like, boy, if this Pindell kid, who sounds pretty good, beats out Shirreffs, then you're looking all right. And he did, but he didn't do so well under the bright lights. But you kind of have a baseline for where the position is going to be next year, because you'll probably get a good feel for what Pindell can do.
Sure. Well, I'm just curious, since you brought up Stanley before, and obviously you have
I love that kid.
You have the experience that you have, covering the basketball.
Can I tell a quick Stanley Robinson story?
Go for it, man.
I just love that kid. He might be that team. That group was such a fun group to go. They're really nice guys. Sticks,
Dyson,
Dougie Wiggins, who's one of my favorite guys ever. But one time, I think it was right in that 2008 range. They were playing pickup in Geyer Gym, and I went to watch. And Stanley was always a little different. He had some issues over the years, and he could be down. And he was very interesting though. He was a thoughtful guy. I walked into Geyer Gym, and the whole team's they're playing pickup, and they start to walk off afterwards, and I'm over on a far wall, waiting to like pick off certain guys to interview. Yeah. Probably had time to grab 2 or 3 guys, and not like anyone was avoiding me, but they're all just hanging out. They're teammates, and they're going off and doing their own thing. Well, Sticks walks across the gym to me, and I'm standing against the wall, and he leans against the wall and sits down, and he goes, "How are things at the paper?" So I just thought it was the funniest thing.
We're changing. We got a new editor. Like, what does he want to know?
He just was a nice. He didn't come over thinking, "I got to do an interview right now," or "I'd like to do it." He just, we hadn't seen each other in a while. He's just a nice guy, and he just wanted to come over and see how I was doing. And it's just, he's just really the nicest, sweetest kid.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, the question I was going to ask, just because you have the sort of the base that you have with basketball too, is, you look at a guy like Shirreffs, who was obviously a leader and, had the respect of all his teammates and went through so many different ups and downs. Do you have like a short list of guys like that who you think back on, like where you really kind of dug their story and what they went through to get to where they ultimately ended up?
Yeah, well, right away, Wiggins comes to mind.
Wiggins, yeah, he had a lot of off the court stuff.
He drank and smoked his way out of UConn and
local guy too.
Out of UMass.
He was like a high school legend in Connecticut.
I think he led the nation in scoring as a senior at East Hartford High, and a gifted kid, and wouldn't ever hurt anyone except himself. So he was late to mature, and I've talked to him a lot over the years, and I did a big story on him a handful of years ago.
I think I remember that. Was he still training to play somewhere else, or
he was? I kept in touch with him, and he would never want to. I said, I want to tell your story. I said, but I always told him, like, if we're gonna do it, let's do it right. Yeah. Because I don't want to just touch on. I said, I want
warts and all, right? You gotta.
Let's just get it all out there. Tell me how you feel. He was very embarrassed. He went into hiding for a long time. But finally, he called me one day. He's like, Mike, I'm ready to do that story if you're still interested. I said, absolutely. So I went and I spent a lot of time with him one summer. Maybe this was 2012, 2013. Spent a lot of time with him and people in his life. And he was trying to turn things around. He was ready to kind of come out of the shadows and say, here I am. I screwed up. A lot of people screwed up, but I'm here to face it. And really, he was trying to get a professional career going. And I put him in touch with Calhoun, actually, who then helped him with some contacts. And Dougie's been playing professionally over in various countries the last 3 or 4 years, and he's doing pretty well. I see him in the summer now at the Greater Hartford Pro-Am and stuff, and once in a while we'll exchange a text or something. But I haven't talked to him too much. But by all accounts, he's doing really well after kind of bottoming out. And look, he found himself, and people are quick to forget how much pressure these guys are under, and also just how much
kids.
Yeah, they're like, boy, if anyone judged me by my actions when I was 18, 20, 22 years old, I mean, I wasn't under the spotlight. Right, these guys are. So certainly he comes to mind. Boy, there's just a lot of. I can't think of a specific right now. There's a lot of interesting. But there's just a lot of interesting journeys people.
Yeah, and you figure there's a lot of these are different sports, but there's always parallels with college kids and what they go through that, like you said, people don't know about, that they don't see, the pressure that they're under. And it's always nice to see, even if it takes a little while, these guys to kind of figure things out late in the game and pick themselves up.
Well, good point. And going back to my point about how you just see these guys for 2 hours on the court under the lights, or 3 hours on the field under the lights, and in your mind, that's kind of all they represent. When you think Bryant Shirreffs, what is he? He's a UConn quarterback. Well, not to everybody. To his fiance, he's much more than the UConn quarterback. Right. To his son, he's much more than a UConn quarterback. Even to the coaches, to people around campus, to his parents, and so it's easy to kind of lose sight of everything that goes into a life and an existence.
Yeah, and you brought up Bryant's parents. Just kind of circle back to what we mentioned before about Jake's column. I thought his dad had some really powerful quotes in there, and he talked a little bit about how I think he cited some remarks that Bob Costas made recently, where he was basically like, football as we know it is probably going to change and we may not recognize it 5, 10, 15 years down the line. I know this is a topic that we could probably spend a whole podcast on, but in your mind, do you think, based on our evolving knowledge of what happens to these guys when they get hit in the head, that we're going to have to either change the game or think about, does it have a long-term future?
Yeah, what's interesting about it is it's just kind of an evolving discussion. And that's all it is right now, is a discussion. There's no absolutes and there's no clear-cut decision to either to make or go against. But it's the more advanced studies get and the more information comes to the forefront, the more you realize that what a sensitive thing the brain is and how traumatic football can be. So something's got to give. Something's got to happen. All of this knowledge met with no action isn't a very powerful thing. But I mean, I think small steps have been taken, and who knows where the sport will be in a handful of years. I mean, I don't think football is going to disappear.
That's hard to imagine. Not anytime soon, because it's still so popular. I mean, the president can tell us that it's not, but it is.
It's wildly popular, and also at how popular would it continue to be with drastic changes? I mean, no one's watching flag football from 1 to 7 p.m. on Sundays. You know what I mean? Look, it's a fascinating time on that front.
Yeah.
And I mean, anyone who tells you they know exactly where it's headed, I think,
No.
is getting ahead of things.
And hopefully we just get smarter about it. I remember, I think you wrote the story about like the study that UConn did about just like how like the different protocols that high schools have.
Yeah.
And I think that's from a preventative standpoint, we've got to get smarter about like even when kids are 8, 10, 12 years old. I mean, they could be, starting to take on some of the head trauma in smaller doses that lead to the long-term issues. So, yeah, again, hopefully it's something that we just keep getting smarter about.
Yeah, and people are just starting to get a full grasp of it all. And almost like still trying to categorize all the information that's available now.
Right.
Like, how do you place importance on different things, different protocols, because there's statewide, there's things mandatory statewide, and then there's school districts and with different mandates, and then there's affluent communities that go well above and beyond what's actually mandatory.
So it's not really
it's all over the map, you know what I mean? Everything from action to combat like heat exhaustion, concussions, to having defibrillators in every gym or stuff like that. So it's kind of a community to community thing. And
sure. All right. Well, let's. I wanted to ask you a little bit about some comments that Randy made on. I guess it was the conference call. Was it the day after?
Yeah, his day after call.
His day after call. I'm not sure exactly what he was asked, but he basically, he sounds like he's out on this whole playoff, how you get into it, because a team like Central Florida that just beat UConn to go to 9-0, they're ranked 18th in the playoff rankings, so they almost, they have no hope of making it into the 14 playoff, which is kind of unfair in a way. So I think a guy like Randy is pushing for, I don't know, you tell me, maybe more teams. Or
he was asked, this was the day after losing to Central Florida, and he was asked, given the fact that UCF was 14th in the latest playoff rankings.
Yeah.
Is that team getting is this conference getting the respect it deserves? And then Edsall went on a 4-minute rant, which was pretty cool, pretty entertaining and insightful. Said a lot of things. He said, "Get rid of the bowls," which I loved hearing. I loved hearing him say that. Get rid of the bowls. He said, "Get rid of them." He says they don't serve the purpose anymore, and Edsall's. But the bottom line for him is, if you win your conference, you should get a shot in the national picture.
Yeah,
I can't disagree with that. This whole Power 5, Group of 5 thing.
Right.
He thinks it's nonsense. If a team like Central Florida goes out, plays everyone on the schedule that it's supposed to play, and doesn't lose a game and wins the conference, they should get a shot in the national picture. And if they don't belong there, fine, they'll get bounced in the first round or whatever. Then they don't make it. Just like in college basketball, Buffalo get bounced by Duke in the 116 game, whatever the heck it is.
Yeah.
So Randy's point was, get rid of the damn bowl games, get a better playoff system in place. And now look, I know it's much more complicated than just saying, "Oh, great point. Let's do that in 2019." There's a lot of dollars and people.
And you have to do something about like conference championship games, and not every conference has those. And so you're adding and subtracting from the schedules, and again, money comes into it. And obviously these teams schedule their games years in advance.
It's a complicated endeavor, but his point was well taken too. He's sick of hearing the NCAA talk about the welfare of the student athlete when he says they talk about the student athlete. He says it's a joke, because then a student athlete at Central Florida goes out and wins their conference, and then they don't get a chance to play in the national playoff. So look, he made a lot of great points. He spoke passionately, and it's great to have him introduce himself into that discussion. He's actually said a few similar things in the past, but it's good to have his voice in that discussion. Again, it's one of those things like there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of people and a lot of dollars and a lot of different scenarios involved, and who knows where it's headed ultimately, but it's good to have people feel strongly about a certain direction.
Sure. It was kind of ironic, too, because I looked at the quote in your story where he was talking about how UCF beat a Big Ten team, right? And it was was it Maryland?
It was Maryland.
his
old team.
His old team. He must have been in kind of like a get off my lawn kind of mood, because he also brought up the whole 6-6, everybody gets a bowl game. He was kind of going down the road of like, this is some sort of metaphor for our country. Like,
what did he say? I wish I had the quote in front of me.
Yeah.
So we're doing the same thing America does. We're enabling and entitling everyone. We're sending teams to bowl games at 6-6 or 5-7. Hey, good for him. I can't disagree with that. You know, celebrate 5-7, celebrate 6-6. Now, I don't know. You could argue against that too. That it's a good experience and whatnot. But look, I'm not saying everyone should agree with him 100%. I felt like it was refreshing to have him come out and say, that's nonsense. That's ridiculous. You know.
Sure, and it's nice to have a coach just tell you what he's thinking, and we don't have to name the previous one, but that was not a give-in with him. So,
you're talking about Bob Diaco?
There it is. 30 minutes in, right?
Did
on
you catch his press conference
right
this
on the
week?
button. No, I did not.
Oh, he had a doozy of a post game.
Another one
Saturday.
So he's on a roll.
He was so depressed. It was depressed Bob Diaco. He was so down. It was. I would encourage fans who either look back and hate him or love him to.
I mean, hate him, love him. I think everybody was entertained by him, right?
Oh, no question. I mean, oh man, he was. It wasn't one of those like laugh out loud Diaco press conferences with like all kinds of just
isms,
just
and
filled with goofy stuff, but there was certainly enough, and it just the overall mood. And watch it on YouTube, you see him. He's just soaking in just misery, and talking about how has served the game for 40 years, and unbelievable. Just shy of must see TV.
Yeah.
Anyway, now that we're back from the Diaco segment of the weekly podcast.
Well, speaking of teams, right on the cusp of bowl contention, Boston College plays UConn this week at Fenway Park, and they're 5-5, right? So this game means a lot to them, because this
they
one win and they
bowl
clinch.
Eligibility. With a win here. Yeah.
But let's start just first with kind of the novelty of the team gets to play at Fenway Park.
Well, you speak to that. You had a great story in the Courant this week, Christopher.
Thank you,
So
Mike.
why don't you tell our dedicated podcast listeners a little bit about what you wrote and a little bit about what you learned about the history of Fenway Park?
Yeah, well, I'll be honest. I didn't realize, and full disclosure, I'm a Red Sox fan, but I had no idea really that football at Fenway Park is not a new thing. I mean, it's new in the sense that in 2015, when BC played Notre Dame there, which again was not a BC home game, figure that one out. That was the first time since 1968 that they'd had a college football game there. But before that, they had professional football. The Boston Patriots came through Fenway Park. There was actually a team, I led with this because I thought it was kind of funny. They were the Boston Yanks. I don't know who thought that was a good idea. Well, the owner did. That's about it. But Fenway Park, having football games, again, it's almost as old as the park itself, which is old, 105 years old. And in that sense, it's kind of cool for the players to have a chance to kind of be part of something historical and unique. I was going to ask you this. You were done with basketball when the team played on the aircraft carrier, right? Like the
that was 2013. I finished in 2011.
So you missed that by a couple of years.
Yep.
Have you ever covered anything that's got sort of like a different feel to it like this? I don't want to use, it's not gimmicky is not the word, but just different and kind of
nothing. Not quite. I mean, just some gymnasiums over the years were like a third of the size of the local, like the gym in Maui.
Yeah.
It's awesome. The gym in the Bahamas for the Paradise Gym.
Yep.
It looked like if Rashad Anderson's jump shot was too high, it was going to scrape the ceiling, that type of thing. But no, nothing.
Yeah. So this
like that.
And you can speak to sort of some of the logistics. I talked to the head groundskeeper at Fenway, and he was just kind of telling me like that they basically the field is converted into a football field, and then they'll rip it up and they'll get it ready for baseball again in the springtime.
Yeah.
But so you won't even, when you're there, if you're a fan watching it, it's not gonna be like an Oakland Raiders game
Right.
where you can see the infield
Yeah.
from the Oakland Athletics because they're still sharing the stadium. They put in a full-fledged
Yep.
gridiron, and there's some unique circumstances surrounding the sideline, right? You want to talk about what's going on there?
It's just a fascinating experience for all the reasons that were cited in your story, the historical aspect, and but it could be a logistical nightmare. I mean, and here's a funny side note before we get to some of the sidelines stuff, how the teams are aligned and share one sideline. But Kyle Muncy, who's the main contact for the football program right now, and as part of the UConn communications staff, deals with the TV crews and all kinds of stuff. And he told a quick funny story the other day about how the TV crews are wondering about capturing the teams coming onto the field. Now, you think about college football, and they burst onto the field through smoke and with cannons and fire and all that stuff. Well, at Fenway, they're coming up through the dugout. So
Really?
they're going to be going basically single file in cleats, probably tiptoeing up the stairs of the
clacking
dugout.
along, yeah.
Exactly. Just trying not to tweak an ankle before the game even starts. So it's not like they're going to burst out onto the field through smoke.
That's a fun visual too.
Yeah, it's kind of neat. And I have actually been up there to cover hockey at Fenway.
Oh, okay. Yes, you did
so I
the main game?
did go up there. No, what did I cover? I was up there.
Or maybe
several years
the
ago.
winter, like when it was the NHL?
Yeah, it was part of that whole celebration. It wasn't an NHL game. Trinity College played up there.
Oh, right, yeah, because they had college games.
So I was up there for one of the triple headers or something. But
Gotcha.
it was interesting seeing the players make the trek from the rink down to the dugout,
Yeah.
But logistically, in terms of the actual game, it's a bizarre setup. The teams will share a sideline, which is going to create a nightmare. Now, no one has an advantage. It is what it is. But teams can't pass the 45-yard line. They're going to be separated like hockey teams sharing one side of the rink.
No penalty box in between.
Right. So UConn's been practicing that way this week with coaches limited in where they could go and substitution patterns being affected as well. Where if you're down at the 5 and you're trying to send a kid in, way back at the 45, that's altered. And a kid can run out through the end zone and then circle back around, that type of thing. But communication's also an issue because just because you can't be in places you're used to being. So it's unique. Hey, it's part of the price you pay. It's a cool venue. It's a cool opportunity. It's a huge moneymaker.
Yeah.
So you're walking out of there with a boatload of money, and you're creating an interesting opportunity for the program and an interesting opportunity to create some memories for the players. So, hey, that's a small price you pay. That it's going to be a bit of a goofy setup. So what?
Yeah, and you hear the criticism that some fans might have, which is you're taking a game away from Rentschler Field, and I know you probably talked to David about this back when it was first announced and everything, and he talked to me a little bit too about how he really didn't take any of that lightly. But like you said, I mean, it's a nice chunk of change.
They're getting $1.125 million, which was the largest single game guarantee in program history until they agreed to play Clemson, I think, in 2020.
Yeah.
But they came to that agreement in the months after the Fenway thing was finalized, and that's just for slightly over the 1.125. So it's a lot of money. I think I don't have the stories or the information in front of me, but I remember reporting when the South Florida game was getting shuffled around, asking David, what's the take, what's the gross revenue for a home game?
Not 1.125.
No, I think they're insured for like $400,000.
Yeah.
So let's say they'd get $500,000 out of a home game. Yeah. They're getting over $8 million to play this game.
Yeah, and some nice exposure, and I think it's going to be on maybe like CBS College Sports or something, or I don't know if you have that.
It is CBS Sports Network.
Yep.
Thanks to the game notes here. Look, it's a cool look, and the team is 3-7.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to come down the stretch of a football season without something unique to harp on. I'm not saying, getting to see them in person at Fenway or watch them on TV in Fenway is anything equivalent to playing for bowl eligibility or significant place in the standings, but it's something. It's kind of cool. It's playing a New England rival who they've never beaten, who humiliated them last year, just crushed them at Fenway Park. It's really kind of neat. And hey, they'll be wearing blue. They're the home team.
They're the home team. I think they're on paper they should have more fans, but again, it being in BC's backyard, I don't know how many of the home teams share the tickets they actually sold, but they were given the lion's share.
They were
22,000.
They were given the bulk of the ticket allotment for distribution, but now look, it holds like 37,000, and last I heard from the Fenway group is they're expecting 25,000.
Okay.
So whoever wants to go can still find tickets.
Day of it even, right?
Probably, yeah. I wouldn't. I would certainly guess.
Yeah.
And look, I still think it's going to have the feel of a road game. I think it's going to feel like a Boston College crowd and look like a Boston College crowd. But UConn will be well represented. It'll be more UConn fans at this game than there would be at a traditional road game.
Yeah, for sure. And just to kind of circle it back to the opponent again, like you said, BC rival. I mean, again, how what a hot rivalry that was on the basketball court for a while there in the Al Skinner days, right? I mean, there were some good battles with the Boston College basketball team, and this is a chance to maybe get those juices flowing a little bit too.
Yeah, UConn BC's fun. It's been up and down over the years. It's been UConn dominated them for all those years, and men's basketball, and there was the acrimony over the conference affiliation and BC's move to the ACC and all that. So and the fan bases don't necessarily love each other. It's always fun to rekindle that stuff. Now, UConn's got to do something about it on the field to make it feel like anything but an afterthought for
right?
BC.
0 for 19 or something?
They 11-2, I believe.
Oh, that's not as bad as I thought, but
two
still.
ties. 11 BC leads 11-0 with 2 ties. And last year was gross, 31-0. And I think that was the game. I think UConn had negative rushing yards. I think they had -9, something like that.
That's not a fun stat.
No, it didn't work out so well. That was what? That was Donovan Williams' second start.
Okay.
And
so that was the end of last year was really ugly.
Oh yeah.
And again, I mean, just to kind of put things in perspective, you go back to then and when things were as dire as they've ever looked for the program to now 3-7, but like with, there's been a spark this year. I think can we say that they've at least hit on some of the entertainment factor that we've talked about a lot, like just making themselves into a program that people can potentially, going forward get a little more excited about.
I mean, I think look through 10 games last year, they were also 3-7.
Yep.
But last year they were also 3-3, and with each loss, it just got progressively worse and absolutely just crumbled and fell apart. I think UConn has a better look coming down the stretch, even though it's lost 3 in a row, than it did last year. So let's see them represent themselves well in this game. At Cincinnati in the season finale is a winnable game, and I think a really important game heading into the offseason.
Just to finish on some sort of a positive note.
Yeah, just win one of these games. Let's say they lose to BC, but play decent. And then you go out to Cincinnati and finish off year one under Edsall with a victory. I think that gives the kids who are returning, and there's a lot of key players returning. I think that gives them a little extra something to believe in. I think it creates a little positive energy in the offseason for the fan base. And so it just crumbled in such dramatic fashion last year. It was just ridiculous. Ridiculous is the best word.
And then from the fan standpoint, you had the added, specter of, Diaco's not going anywhere. So then that was almost like when they, figured all that out at the end of the year. I think that was right almost at the first of the year, right? Or
he was fired the day after Christmas.
And, so that, before that, things were looking even more hopeless because it was like we didn't just go 3-9. We are stuck with this guy.
Right, and you had to hear him say recruiting was going really well, which it wasn't. You had to hear him say the fixes were easy. And I guess I shouldn't be too critical of that because he said the fixes are easy, but what he meant was, and he did clarify later, the fixes are easily identifiable. So he had
Always
vision
with the
for how
semantics
to.
with him.
Well, right, and he had a vision for how to correct all that was wrong, and I guess the shared vision was make sure you get the right offensive coordinator, and then he didn't follow through on a few things on that front. Whatever.
We don't have to rehash that.
We all know the story. It just it didn't
yeah.
end well.
Sure.
All
right. Well, thanks, Mike. This was fun. Obviously, not as fun as it would be if our pal was here, and hopefully
I kind of enjoyed myself.
I was trying to give you a chance to. No, but you pumped his tires at the beginning, so.
He's the best, and he'll be back to rant and rave and deliver next week, I hope.
All right, cool. We'll see you then, man. Thanks.
All right, buddy.